The entire Battlefield community is currently discussing the new gameplay, the changes to recoil and spread. I've tested the whole thing and we are getting to the bottom of it in this video. And by the end you will know how much has actually changed or what might just be your imagination. I want to give a little spoiler right away. It's not as dramatic as many people are telling themselves just because they suddenly can't hit anything anymore. So let me quickly catch you up on how I did all this. There is a test range in Portal and there is a nice wall in that. I'll show you guys. You can shoot at it and the shots are displayed, so to speak, showing you where every single shot goes. That means it's a super wall to test recoil to see where all the shots land. Now, I always shot at the wall from 20 meters. Once without controlling the recoil with the mouse, meaning pulling down against it, and once with. The same thing at 40 meters, and at the end we are doing it again at 60 meters with an LMG to clarify the whole thing again on how you actually shoot better in Battlefield 6. Now, I grabbed the TR7 first because I know it has a whole lot of recoil and a whole lot of spread. I obviously did the whole thing once before the patch and then repeated it after to compare. Quite a lot of effort, including the editing, so please leave a sub and a like, that would be great to support my work a little bit. Thank you for that. So, TR7 20 meters in front of the wall without controlling the recoil and then again with. Here the 20 meters are really enough. I don't need to go to 40 to avoid making this video unnecessarily long. So we see I have the before and after picture in front of me here. Also, there was talk about the recoil becoming more consistent so that you can learn it more or less, so that it doesn't go right sometimes, left sometimes, etc. With the TR7, that's a bit hard to see. I'll tell you honestly, the thing is so wild and it's difficult to find any pattern there. On the after side, it always goes more up to the left, so I wouldn't say you can feel any consistency or learnability here. We see that after about the fourth shot, the spread slowly kicks in. Before, the recoil was maybe a bit wilder. You can definitely see it that way. Then we see the picture where I try to control the recoil. Of course, that works better sometimes and worse the other times. That is, I'm not a robot, right? I pull it down, but it can happen that it breaks out to the left and right naturally. We see in the before picture, for example, all the way to the right, on the right side, the horizontal recoil just punched right through there. Here too, I have to say, I would have somehow wished for a slightly clearer result. So, what I actually took away from this whole test is that the weapons that already had a lot of spread and recoil anyway, they don't really play any difficult at all. Unfortunately, I have to say it like that. Well, what does unfortunately mean? The changes just aren't that noticeable there because the recoil was already wild anyway, and now maybe it's a bit more consistent. But you don't really notice that at all, and the spread was already so high that this minimal extra dispersion doesn't stand out at all, honestly. As I said, I thought I'd test it first with a weapon that has a lot of it, because with a lot, you see a lot. But actually, the trick was to take a weapon that shoots very accurately. Because next we come to the court. Here too, I obviously did tests again, blah blah blah. Here I also shot from 20 and from 40 meters this time. I'm not going to show you all the tests now, we're going straight to the result, or rather to the before and after picture. And here you can already see a little better regarding spread. On the left side the line goes relatively straight up and we see right at the end where the recoil actually stops, so it doesn't consistently go upwards, but at some point the weapon stays on one level, and that's when the weapon starts to drift a little bit to the left and right, or rather the hits drift apart a bit. We see at the very bottom, we are still in the before picture. The line goes relatively straight up or in a row, meaning without spread, and then the spread slowly kicks in. On the right side, the after picture, there we see now that firstly, the recoil actually always goes in the same direction, roughly, but because the spread kicks in earlier, we see it on the far left side already after the second shot, and on the third after that, then like after the fifth and after the fourth, it gets really wild. But here you can see much better that there is a lot more spread present than before. So here, as I said, you can see much better that the bullets impact around the crosshair and not where it sits actually. And you see the same picture in the before and after picture where I try to control it. On the left side, the grouping is much tighter, the bullets lie much closer together compared to the right in the after picture. There, the shots are simply spread further apart, just a bit wider because spread is added. And as we all know, you obviously cannot control that. So the accurate weapons simply became less accurate. Next, we would have the court at 40 meters. The previous test was 20 meters, now 40, so twice as far. And here too, we see the same picture. The differences naturally reveal themselves a bit more there. With the recoil, you have to say the picture is actually quite similar, but when I try to control it, then of course you see the spread much better because the bullets are more spread over an area, and then you simply see the distribution a bit better. On the left side, in the before picture, closer together again, and on the right side, there we see that the whole thing just fans out a bit wider, right? Next, another example with a popular weapon, a very popular weapon, the SG553. Again, a candidate with more spread and more recoil, very similar to the TR7, not as wild, but you know what I mean. And here too, we have the same picture again. The recoil patterns look relatively similar, so maybe a bit more consistent on the right side, in quotes, just like it's supposed to be. So it goes more in the same direction. If we look at the far right one on the before side, for example, we see at the bottom that it's completely different from the other two. So that actually seems to be the case. But the change that the recoil is more identical now is quite subtle. And when I try to control it, we have a very similar grouping, maybe fanned out a bit more in the after picture. But as I said, if the weapon already had a lot of spread and recoil anyway, then not a whole lot has changed there, I feel. Now let's go to the weapon where you can see it very well again, and that brings us to the SGX. Tried 20 and 40 meters again. First we see 20, we see the weapon doesn't have much recoil, before and after is similar. Right, the spread, the dispersion just a bit further apart. But here you have to say that the recoil isn't quite as identical as with the other weapons. Sometimes it goes straight up on the first two, and on the right one, meaning the last grouping, it goes more like diagonally up and to the right. So I almost found that before it was somehow more predictable, but as I said, the changes are quite subtle and there is still variation in it. Meaning exactly the same as in, let's say, Counter-Strike or something, where you can memorize it. It simply isn't in Battlefield. Although that would be nice in my opinion. Let's move on to the controlled fire. And here we see the same picture as with the cord again. On the left, a bit tighter together. The shots are really nicely clustered in one clump. And on the right, the clump is simply fanned out a bit wider. You really have to look relatively closely there, I'll tell you honestly. So many will probably also say it looks the same, but if you look really closely, you can definitely see that because of the dispersion, the right grouping is a bit larger, a bit further apart. Those were 20 meters. Let's go to the 40 meter picture of recoil. Very similar picture. Not a whole lot is happening on the right side, all the way to the right. So basically the last one, there you can see the spread really nicely, how it simply spreads apart. With the others, it's actually fine. So it is of course always an interplay between recoil and spread, right? If both have a bit of variation, it's difficult to read a real consistency out of that. But here too, again on the before picture, now with the controlled fire, it is again a bit closer together. On the right side, in the after picture, the shots are a bit further apart. Though I have to say here now, the differences here are really very subtle, and as I said, that can sometimes be related to the fact that you obviously don't perfectly counter it always or identically every time. So a third type of variation comes into play there. It's already a bit difficult to compare. I did a few more weapons, but the video is already long enough. Before I show you now how to shoot best at slightly longer distances using the LMG, a quick summary again. So, weapons like the TR7, like the SG, which already have a lot of recoil and spread anyway compared to the others, the small change they made, this really subtle change ultimately, which some people don't even notice, is almost unrecognizable and also hardly traceable in a test like this because there's already so much spread. So if you have 500% spread, let's say, then 510, spread or dispersion isn't really noticeable. But if you have 5% spread and then after the change 15, because 10% was added, the example is very exaggerated, I know, and now 10% on top, you have triple the spread. So you know what I'm getting at. You notice it more on the very accurate weapons than on the ones that are already inaccurate anyway. But now to the LMG. There I went to 60 meters with a 3x scope. First off, a grouping when you simply hold down full auto completely, which is of course then the most inaccurate. There you can already see how the bullets actually impact really to the left and right of the red dot. So that is what bloom and dispersion and spread means. Then on the second attempt I did longer bursts, meaning about 3 or 4 shots and also relatively quickly in succession. That means there is of course also a time where the recoil and spread resets again, meaning reset themselves. And it is longer than you think. And if you shoot into this reset phase again, then not much actually changes in the grouping. And at the end, I then did a 2-shot burst and waited longer in between. As I said, 60 meters is for an LMG in Battlefield 6 right now relatively far in quotation marks, right? As I said, 2-shot bursts, waited relatively long until the recoil completely resets itself again, or rather the spread too. Long story short, on the left side, full auto, we see it spreads around like that. I naturally try to control the recoil there too, because otherwise the whole thing would have landed in the roof somewhere. But you see, this was about spread here, that they already break out pretty far to the left and the right. Next to it, in the middle, is then the 3 or rather 4-shot bursts. Already a slightly better grouping, but still a lot of outliers. And you see, it's not really accurate. If you imagine a little guy standing there at 60 meters right now, you won't hit much there. And now all the way to the right, that is how you should actually shoot, then with a bit of patience, with time to reset the dispersion again and not simply blast away, because there we see the grouping is much more accurate. You can almost get headshots with that. So that is the way to go if you have a very inaccurate weapon. 60 meters is admittedly relatively far for a fully automatic one, but this is also supposed to be an extreme example. Ultimately, that is how you should shoot with an LMG. I was also standing. If you are, of course, prone or crouching, the whole thing is obviously a little bit more accurate. Yeah, that was the test that I came up with. I think I've said the conclusion often enough by now. Feel free to watch the video here that is being displayed now. You'll definitely still have something to watch. As I said, subscribe to the channel. A little support is always good because these tests are always quite time consuming and that makes him happy, meaning me and YouTube too, because then it suggests these videos of mine further and more, and then I'll get to 1000 subs and that is great. And we'll see us in the next video. Bye!